joint session of the cabinet, and now regularly the two cabinets meet, not in their entirety, but most of them together every 2 years or so to discuss all issues of common interest. What I want to say is there's close relations not only on the government level, on the economic level, on the trade level, but also on the societal level. Let me come back to the other interests. The second I would say is that Germany is very concerned about security risks that emanate from the neighboring region, the Middle East. After all, the EU shares borders with the Middle East, sea borders, and since the so-called Schengen Agreement that has created a zone with no borders within Europe or between 25 states of Europe, actually Germany borders directly on the Mediterranean. There is no more borders between the Mediterranean and Germany, and thus Germany is affected also directly by these threats that they perceive come from the region. And usually when people speak about these threats, they speak about terrorism, they speak about irregular migration and organized crime. The third interest is that Europeans, and Germans among them, have an interest in having good relations with Muslim populations in the neighborhood, but also in Europe itself. And these relations have been impaired over the last 10 years or so by the perception of a clash of civilization. And of course, this perception of a clash has been fed and fueled not only by the persistence of conflict, but also by the persistence of double standards of Europeans dealing with these conflicts. So it's a perception that is actually there on both sides of the divide. The fourth interest is that Germany and Europeans want to have good relations with resource-rich Arab states and with Iran for securing a reliable energy supply, above all oil and gas, and securing moderate energy prices. Now, moderate energy prices is of course important to all European states, but the percentage of resources that these states get from the region differ very much. Germany itself does not get most of its resources from the Middle East or Iraq, but rather from other European states and from Russia. The fifth interest I want to point out is that Germany traditionally has tried to put a lot of interest on the rule of law in international affairs. The idea that Germany wants to contribute to safeguarding the universality and the indivisibility of human rights and respect for the principles of the UN Charter. And therefore Germany has actually been very active in trying to secure a lot of support for the International Criminal Court and in trying to support legal ways. Now this is one of the interests where it becomes very clear that German policies, and I will come back to that, are often working against their own. Instead of really trying to implement their interest, really trying to implement human rights all over the world and working for the indivisibility of human rights, have other priorities. I want to come to the second point, and that is, how does that translate? How do these interests translate into German positions and into German policies? German policymakers have in general come to the conclusion that the different interests that I have enumerated can best be reconciled, can best be served if there is peace in the Middle East. So they all share in what can be called a collective European national interest by peace agreements between Israel and its Arab neighbors. All that is the classic position of the Europeans, based on the principle land for peace, as well as peaceful, good neighborly relations between Israel and the wider Arab and Muslim world, as has been spelled out in the Arab Peace Initiative. Accordingly, Germany has supported all the European declarations on the Arab-Israeli conflict and on the Middle East peace process since the Venice Declaration in 1980. And it has also exerted quite some efforts to support the peace process initiated in Madrid and then in Oslo through financial and technical means. And actually, for quite a long time, Germany has been the biggest European donor for the Palestinians. Germany has also tried to put that into EU positions, in a sense to make them progressive at times, at critical times, I would say. One of that declarations that Germany has influenced was the 1999 Berlin Declaration, which stated for the first time that Palestinians not only have a right to self-determination, but that would include also the option of a Palestinian state. Now, one might think that is quite late to come to that conclusion in 1999, and of course the context was that the Europeans asked the Palestinians not to declare the state after the end of the original interim period, but rather give them a nice declaration and ask them to wait for one more year until final status negotiations would come to a close, and then go for a declaration. Now we find ourselves 11 years later, 12 years later, and we're approaching the same kind of situation, it seems to me. But let me get back to German policies. I think one can identify 7 main features or characteristics of German policies towards the conflict or towards Israel and Palestine. One is that Germany has consistently worked in the framework of the European Union, so they try to be part of the EU position, and at times also they have tried to hide behind the EU position. In the 1990s, Germany tried very much to be what Ehud Barak called actually a good ambassador of Israel within the European Union. So to defend Israeli interests in the European Union. But later, actually, German position within the European sphere have changed in a sense. And I would say one of the reasons was that in 2004, with the EU becoming much larger, Germany has found itself much more in the middle of the spectrum. So you had new member states coming in that were much more pro-Israel, and Germany found itself in a situation where it tried to mediate more between those states who traditionally were more pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab, and those who were more pro-Israel. The second point is that Germany has always put a lot of emphasis on working on the regional environment, on working on regional integration. The idea was that it's very difficult to tackle the peace process directly, so let us try to work around and prepare the regional situation for the peace process. And with this, they have engaged in the multilateral process, the Madrid process, the multilateral talks that came out of the Madrid process. They've also engaged very much in the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the neighborhood policy, and the Union for the Mediterranean. The third main feature is that Germany, as the other EU member states, but Germany very distinctively so, has accepted that the US administration would be the main power broker in the Middle East. Meaning that at the time France, Germany, and other European states have brought initiatives for solving the conflict, but they have always stepped back when the US signaled that they were not happy